now for a discussion presented by Neustar. Please welcome the VP at the Knowledge Lab at Neustar, Marc Vermut, in conversation with Skiftex research editor Jeremy Cressman.
Marc, welcome to today's summit. Happy to have you here.
Thanks for having us here and me.
So let me tell you, as I understand what Neustar does, you help travel brands think more strategically about how to use data, whether that's business data or customer data. So given that expertise, can you share a snapshot of the travel data landscape as you see it in 2021, and maybe what are the big challenges that you're noticing right now?
Yeah, sure. I'll start actually more broadly with marketing data as a whole across industries, and to steal Jen Brady, it's identity, identity, identity. It is the permission and access to information about your customers and your prospects and how to reach them. And so for the travel industry specifically, because you have both, especially in hospitality, you have direct relationships and you have indirect relationships with your guests who stay with you. It's about increasing access and capture of first-party data. So we're seeing a lot of refocus on loyalty programs, really providing value so that consumers see the value exchange of providing that information, so you know who people are, because there's a lack of that first-party data because of OTA bookings, right? If you think about 50% of all bookings come in through OTA, and there's a disintermediation there of guest information until really at the last minute. So you lose opportunities for upsells. You lose the ability to market around the experiences that your properties can provide, especially if you're more of a personal destination and you have a spa or you have restaurants. You want to find the ability to get consumers to engage with you and know how to reach them. And the last part is, even if you are getting that information, it's fractional, meaning it's a piece, it's one identifier, one addressable touch point to reach a consumer. So a lot of what we focus on with travel brands in general, but especially travel brands, which may only have a little bit of information about their guests who enjoy coming to their properties, is enhancing and cleaning that information. And you may think, well, I have first-party data, so I know my customers. But what we actually find is that when we work with hospitality brands and we look at their CRM, we find an ability to increase known and linked records together about 20 to 40%. We can increase the number of touch points in which you can reach consumers. So you may have address, but you'd like a reachable email or a phone number, 25% to 60%, and duplicate records, because you have multiple systems that are bringing in who your customers are and how to reach them. We often find at least 12 to 15% of the records are duplicated, which means that you may not have a consistent and complete view of not just how to reach your guests, but also how they've been engaging with you. So it's all about a clean, accurate, expanded view and finding ways to increase. And I heard the conversation before talking about mobile apps, right? How do we create engagement where consumers are willing to have a first-party relationship with us, and we have permission to market to them and provide information that increases their experience with us?
So it's all about getting good data. Where does it come from? How do I reach customers more easily? So let's actually dive a little bit more deeply into this topic of targeting, right? Because it's become really important right now. You don't want to target customers that are already going to stay with you anyway, or maybe more loyal, right? So are there new strategies that you're noticing this year, or best practices that maybe have evolved since we have come through COVID?
Yeah, so I would actually go back to the point that you just said, and I would adjust it.
Okay.
Just because somebody is your guest doesn't actually mean you don't need to market to them, because we've done research with the Mobile Marketing Association, with the MMA. What we've shown for focusing on marketing, right? Your best customer may not be the person that you need to market to, right? But within the people you want to come stay at your properties, you're probably not the only property, the only brand that they're considering when they travel. So just because someone's been a guest doesn't mean you don't need to market to them. So one of the things that we've seen with targeting is being more efficient and more effective with the dollars that you have. So what you should be doing is identifying those groups or audiences or segments of your guests and people who look like those guests, and only putting especially paid marketing ads in front of the people where that ad is going to increase the likelihood that they're going to book a visit with you? And or even within the population who are visiting, should I spend to emphasize all those additional experiences or add-on services that I could sell to them? So the first thing is, within the world of targeting is thinking about incrementality and measurement, right? So I need to measure and understand how audiences respond to me because of the marketing, not because they love my property, not because it's in a location they're going to go to, not because my brand resonates with them and aligns with their values and the things that are important to them. And so they're going to consistently stay within either my brand or my portfolio of brands.
Right.
But that's one. The other thing that we're seeing is while there are challenges in understanding who your consumers are, and there's a lot of, I'm sure we're going to talk about that in a second, flux of what you can see. What we're seeing is an increased use of additional signals that let you be smarter to understand if consumers are in market based on their browsing behavior, based on their purchase behavior, based on other attitudes, so that you can more intelligently target consumers while they're in the path to considering a vacation. And so what's important is an increasing use of clean rooms and pseudonymized data that enable brands to analyze all of those live signals while preserving the privacy that consumers increasingly expect today, and that's required because of technological and regulatory requirements that are out there. So I think it's both identifying the audiences that you really need to market to get them to take action to either book or add valuable services on, and or to get the information that enhances your view of them. No one brand has a complete picture of what their consumers are doing, what their guests are interested in, and it's about going out and finding that information and bringing it together in a single data lake or data environment, so that you can do audience analytics on top of it.
Okay. In your last response, Mark, you talked about this idea of a clean room, which I think you're referring to having anonymized data that you can use to market to people without overly needing to know personal information about them, right? And that actually brings me to this topic of privacy that I think is so important right now. We're in this environment right now where there's all kinds of regulatory impact happening, right? You look at what's happening in Europe, even here in the United States and California and a number of states elsewhere. How should travel brands respond to some of these privacy regulatory concerns or rules that are coming into place? And how do they still make sure that their campaigns can function in that environment?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, there's the tactical, what do I need to do to understand where I am in assessing my current environment? And then there's the proactive, what can I do better? So let's step to the first part, right? So the first thing, and I talked about that in the first thing you asked about first party data. So the first thing is assess what first party data you have. Make sure it's clean. And first party data means data that consumers are giving directly to you, a phone number, an email address, the fact that you know when they booked or where they booked, or that on your website they're searching these properties, all the engagement and activities they have directly with you.
Okay.
And so you want to make sure that it's clean and accurate. Do I have the right contact information? Are all my systems using the same type of identity for that guest or their household, so that I can link all those activities together, right? If you don't have a holistic picture that's accurate for that household or that guest, you may make bad decisions against it. Then so you got to look, what do I have? Then you have to look beyond that, right? So the partners and the platforms that you work with, what identity do they have? How are they tracking or observing consumer behavior to enhance consumers' experience with them? Because while the story, if you read the headlines, is all about privacy protection and making sure we follow these regulations and using consumer data responsibly, which is all critical and important. And one of our core values at Neustar is transparency. So it's important that everyone's aware of what's going on. But the value here is you can also educate consumers, and you see that with the implementation in Apple's iOS 14.5, where people are being now proactively prompted, if you're an Apple user, to give access to track my data outside of just the app. So now is an opportunity for brands and marketers, especially hospitality companies, to clearly articulate for consumers the benefit that they get by allowing brands to understand how they engage, what's important to them, and where they respond from a measurement perspective, so they have permission to gain access to this first party data. So you need to know where am I losing it? How are the marketing platforms and data platforms I work with, where are they collecting the data from?
Right.
Is that going to go away as these identifiers and our ability to observe goes away? How do I migrate to second party data partners? So that's like a Facebook is a second party data partner.
Okay.
They have a first party relationship with consumers, and they have permission to share that information with a brand, often on an anonymized or pseudonymized basis, so that the brand can make smarter decisions. Facebook's a great example, right? Measurement's critical. You get great value of making your marketing go further when you know what actually works. And so we work with Facebook where we can actually measure at a user level, so which audiences really work, how much of an ROI brands are getting by using Facebook marketing, because we work with them on a type of differential privacy basis where we get information at an audience level, but we can measure it at a user level because we have identity that lets us link Facebook's universe of people with the brand's universe of people and bring those together, but neither side knows anything about the other side's customer data, right? Mm-hmm. We're a neutral place where we can, with authority and accuracy, link these things together, and we provide advice that's not about each individual user, and that goes to like questions of where do I plan and deploy my media, but we're able to analyze them without exposing it. So a clean room is simply a place, as you said, where someone who has the ability to link multiple data sets that are keyed on different identifiers, and an identifier is simply a thing that allows me to associate an event or an activity to an individual or a household. So there are lots of different types. So you have to work with an identity resolution provider who has multiple ways of knowing if a person is a person or the household they belong to. So they need offline identity, so addresses and phone numbers and email addresses, and they need ways of tracking you online. And that's typically when a consumer has now given permission for you to see what they're doing online to make their experience better. It has to be about the consumer, about your guest.
Yeah. Well, you say it's all about having to be about the consumer. And I think that brings me to another topic I wanted to touch on, which is personalization. This is a term that gets used endlessly in the travel industry, in any, industry today, right? Yeah. But I'm curious if you can give me your honest opinion on this, Marc. What do you think the industry gets right about personalization and what that actually means? And what do you think it gets wrong?
Well, I think it gets right in the own channels and leveraging like the email platforms and direct mail platforms, the traditional uplift experimentation to know this message to this person based on what they've done with us before is more likely to get them to take action. But even that is on an audience level. So the idea of doing one-to-one personalization at scale, that's not the right idea, because you don't know for sure what anyone's journey or path to you is going to be and exactly what they explicitly need in the moment. But if you can identify people like me, like Marc Vermut, and what my interests are and what I respond to, and if I have more affinity to your brand and your properties than to other brands and other properties, and you come up with campaigns in places where people like me are more likely to respond, we think that's a more effective way of doing a form of mass personalization. Okay. Because one-to-one marketing, it isn't really here today. And it's really costly to implement and build out. And you get a significant amount of that benefit by focusing on audiences of a reasonable size, where you can come up with distinct messaging and distinct needs for that audience. It's about how much bandwidth and how much budget do you have, and deploying and using that effectively, and then measuring it. So that's the other key trend I think the travel company should be focused on as behavior changes coming out of COVID, is measuring what really works, both at an overall market level using like a marketing mix model, and then at an audience level, at a publisher platform campaign message level, which is what multi-touch attribution allows. And that's why we're seeing an increase in the number of hospitality brands who are engaging in building out unified analytics solutions. There's a lot of significant return, significant ROI on investing in measurement solutions, so you can validate that the information you have about audiences that you're leveraging through first and second party data and activating is actually working.
Yeah. Well, we're just about out of time here, Mark, but any final thoughts, maybe 15, 20 seconds, any things people should take away about what Neustar's doing or what you see coming?
Yeah, I think what's really critical is augmenting the information that you have about people and audiences today, especially as behaviors are going to change coming back from COVID, and there's an explosion of a desire to leave your house and go travel. Those consumers may behave very differently than the guests that you've experienced pre-COVID. So go out and figure out what kind of additional information can I observe, real-time signals and audience data and behavioral data that will let me target more effectively and pivot my marketing to take advantage of what people want today and not what they may have wanted a year and a half ago when the world looked very different.
Well, Mark, thank you so much. It was great to speak with you today.
Thanks a lot for the time. I appreciate it as well.